Riley, what more did we hear from the Premier about the timing of this announcement?
Yeah, well, Janella, Heather Stephenson says she understands that Manitobans are going to be disappointed with these new restrictions, given that New Year's is right around the corner. Sweeping new restrictions, as you mentioned, being put in place yet again here in Manitoba as COVID cases are again on the rise. 2,154 positive cases here in Manitoba since Friday, 675 of those today alone. Now, as you mentioned, 3/4 of those cases now account for the Omicron variant, with Chief Public Health Officer Dr. Brent Roussin announcing today that capacity limits for all indoor and outdoor public gatherings are being reduced yet again. Gatherings must not exceed 50% of the usual capacity of a space, or 250 people, whichever is less. Now, previously capacity restrictions were slightly more relaxed for people who are vaccinated. Now, the interesting piece in all of this is that there were no further capacity limits on private gatherings. It's still household plus 10 people if you're fully vaccinated, and household plus 5 if someone in that group is not vaccinated. Now, the other change today, right in time for New Year's, and this might impact people who had plans for New Year's Eve, the province limiting liquor sales in restaurants and licensed premises to end at 10 p.m. The Premier says she recognizes that this in particular will be disappointing news to many Manitobans who were maybe hoping to go out someplace to ring in the new year, with the advice being just stay home.
And Riley, let's talk a little bit about the testing backlog, because that's also impacting the numbers. We know it's not a true reflection. So tell us more about how the backlog is impacting folks in Manitoba.
Yeah, certainly we have seen some very long lines, some very long waits for COVID-19 testing in Manitoba. Some people waiting in their cars for several hours, even being told to come back the next day for some of these nasal swabs, these PCR tests at the drive-through testing sites in Winnipeg, and then having to wait 5 days or more for results. Now, Dr. Brent Roussin did address some of the issues they've had. He says capacity is maxed out here in Manitoba, that backlog now at 11,500 swabs here in Manitoba. But he says the other issue they've had with the testing is that some people who have tested positive aren't home when public health tries to call. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
There's a backlog, so people are waiting longer for their test results. But a significant proportion of our test positives we can't get a hold of. So we're phoning people who are ill, who came for testing, tested positive, but no one's at home. And so it's I understand it's a difficult time, but if you were ill and needed to get testing, you need to isolate until you get your results.
Now, to combat this, the province is offering rapid tests to people at testing sites who are vaccinated and symptomatic to try and save some of those PCR tests for people who need them. Now, there have been calls for tougher restrictions as well. We've seen that from doctors and everyday Manitobans, with the province urging Manitobans to get on board.
And Riley, these new public health restrictions mean an impact on the Winnipeg Jets. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, we're seeing some reaction already. The NHL has announced the postponement of Wednesday night's Winnipeg Jets game versus the Blackhawks. As mentioned, gatherings capped at 50% of the usual capacity, or 250 people, whichever is less. The Jets have gone a step further on this, saying no fans will be in the stands for their home games until at least January 11th. Janella?
Riley Lachuk in Brandon, Manitoba. Thanks.